Nobody in the crowded tavern noticed the way Lena flinched when the boss's fingers closed around her wrist. The place smelled of yeast, wood smoke, and spilled ale, and the noise of clinking mugs hid the sharp inhale she made. But the Vampire King did notice. He stood in the shadow between two stone columns, hood lowered, watching as the mute waitress tried to pull her arm back without drawing attention. His red eyes narrowed, glowing faintly beneath the dim lanterns. Only he saw the fear trembling inside her, and only he sensed the faint trace of magic threaded through her silence, an old curse buried beneath her skin like frost. Lena kept her gaze down as the tavern owner, Harvin, leaned close to her ear. His breath smelled of sour wine. She tried to step away, but he tightened his grip and muttered something she couldn't answer. Her throat worked, but no sound came out, not even a whisper. Harvin's irritation sharpened, and without warning, he dragged her toward the back hallway. Chairs scraped as patrons shifted, but no one interfered. To them, she was just the quiet girl who served bread and soup. To him, she was a convenient target. To the Vampire King, she was something else entirely, someone marked by forbidden magic, someone who should not exist this way. Harvin yanked her toward the bathroom door with enough force to make her shoes skid on the stone floor. Lena's heart hammered in her chest. She shook her head desperately, trying to communicate without words, trying to tell him she didn't do whatever he accused her of. But he shoved the door open and pulled her inside the small, dim space, not caring that she tried to brace herself on the frame. Only a few feet away, still hidden in the shadows, the Vampire King stepped forward, his jaw tightening as the door slammed behind her. But before we continue, I want to invite you to something very special. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories. And comment below which city you're watching from. Now, let's continue. Inside the narrow bathroom, Harvin blocked the exit with his body. Lena backed against the wall, her fingers trembling as she raised her hands to sign what she couldn't speak. He waved her gestures away. His voice was low and angry, accusing her of dropping a tray on purpose, of embarrassing him in front of customers. She shook her head, but he grabbed her again, his fingers biting into her arm. Her vision blurred with fear and humiliation, her lungs straining as she wished so desperately that she could shout, cry out, anything. The door suddenly rattled. Harvin froze. A cold silence settled over the room. Lena felt the air shift, growing colder than winter, and a faint metallic scent touched her tongue, sharp as lightning. Harvin turned slowly, unease prickling up his spine. Lena saw the shadow beneath the door deepen, as if darkness itself pressed against it. She tried to warn him with frantic gestures, but he wasn't looking at her anymore. The doorknob twisted. When the door opened, the tavern's dim lantern light framed a tall figure with long black hair and eyes that glowed like embers. The Vampire King stepped inside without asking, without blinking, without even glancing at Harvin. His gaze went straight to Lena, and for the first time in months, she felt something unfamiliar. Safety, immediate and overwhelming, like a warm cloak thrown over her trembling shoulders. Harvin stuttered. "Sir, this is private." "No," the Vampire King said quietly, his voice smooth yet edged with frost. "It is not." Harvin took a step back, suddenly aware that the room felt too small for the three of them. The king moved between them, placing himself in front of Lena, shielding her completely from view. Even the scent of him pushed away Harvin's sour wine breath. He smelled like cold night air and iron, like storms rolling over mountains. Lena pressed a hand to her throat, unable to speak even if she wanted to. She watched as the king raised a hand and rested it lightly on her cheek, careful and slow. His fingers were cool, but his touch was gentle. Her breath hitched. She expected him to look confused or pitying when he noticed she couldn't answer him. Instead, he frowned, not at her, but at the invisible magic constricting her voice. "This is old," he murmured, his thumb grazing her jaw. "A silencing curse. Who put this on you?" Lena widened her eyes in shock. No one had ever sensed it before. Even healers said she was simply born unable to speak. Harvin sputtered, sweat beading on his forehead. She's just mute. That's it. People like her. They're slow. They don't think right." The Vampire King turned his head slightly. just slightly, but the temperature in the room dropped. Harvin's voice died in his throat. The king did not need threats. The silence that followed was enough to make Harvin's knees tremble. "She is cursed, not broken," the king said coldly. "And you have treated her as if she were neither human nor worthy of breath." Lena felt her eyes sting. No one had ever defended her like that. No one had recognized her curse. No one had stood between her and cruelty with such absolute certainty. Harvin swallowed. "She works for me. What I do with her, you will never touch her again." The king's voice didn't rise, didn't harden, but it carried the weight of an ancient promise, the kind that could crush kingdoms. Harvin stepped back so fast he hit the sink. Lena tried to sign something. She didn't want trouble, she didn't want bloodshed, she didn't want this powerful stranger to make an enemy because of her. But the king gently caught her hands. He held them the way someone holds a fragile artifact, like something precious. He watched her fingers move, trying to understand. "You want me to stop," he whispered, interpreting the shapes she made. "You are more afraid for me than for yourself." She nodded. He let out a slow breath, impressed despite himself. A human girl cursed into silence, and still thinking of others. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Whoever took your voice feared what you might reveal, and I intend to find out why." Lena's heart thudded painfully. She shook her head again, signing frantically. She didn't want him searching for anything. She didn't want the past coming back. She didn't want the truth uncovered. But the king only watched her with a solemn expression. "Your silence was forced, not chosen, and that makes it a crime against my realm." He turned to Harvin one last time. "You have one chance to keep your life. You will answer her with respect. You will not raise your voice, and you will never touch her again." Harvin nodded so fast it almost looked like a bow. The king took Lena's hand, surprisingly warm now, and led her out of the bathroom, out of the hallway, and into the open tavern where dozens of eyes turned toward them. The murmurs grew, rising like waves, but he didn't release her. He didn't hide her. He walked beside her with the certainty of a man who had made a decision that would not be undone. And Lena, mute and trembling, realized something terrifying and beautiful all at once. Her life had just changed, and she didn't know if she was ready for the power that stood at her side. The tavern fell silent as the vampire king crossed the room with Lena at his side. Every pair of eyes tracked them, but he didn't look at anyone. His attention stayed locked on her, as if guiding her through a storm only he could see. The scent of wood smoke and stew clung to her clothes, and she kept her gaze lowered, wishing she could melt into the floor. The king, however, walked with the kind of authority that pushed all whispers into the corners of the room. Even without his crown, everyone sensed who he truly was. He didn't stop until they reached the front door. When he opened it, a rush of cold night air swept in, mixing with the heat of the tavern and making Lena's skin prickle. She clutched her apron with shaking fingers, unsure whether to step forward or run back to the safety of the familiar chaos inside. But he didn't pull her. Instead, he waited, giving her the space to choose. It was a small gesture, but it made her chest tighten. No one had ever waited for her decision before. She finally stepped outside. The wooden porch creaked under her shoes, and she breathed deeply, tasting the crisp night wind. The king followed and closed the door behind them. Moonlight painted the street in pale silver, and their shadows stretched across the cobblestones. Lena looked up at him cautiously, signing a question. "What do you want from me?" He studied her hands, his eyes glowing softly in the moonlight. "I want to know who silenced you," he said. "And why?" Lena shook her head fiercely. She didn't want this investigated. She didn't want old memories dragged from their graves. She grabbed her throat, then her chest, trying to tell him it didn't matter anymore, that she had already learned to live with it. But the king took a slow step closer, the cold scent of night clinging to him. "You move your hands like someone who has been quiet for a long time," he murmured. "But your eyes look like someone who once tried to shout." Her breath caught. He wasn't wrong. But she pushed the thought away, turning her face toward the street. The king didn't take offense. Instead, he touched his chest in a respectful gesture common among royal clans, permission to speak freely. He lowered his voice. You are afraid of the past, not because you are weak, but because someone made it dangerous. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, trembling. His words reached too deeply. She looked away, but he wasn't done. Magic that silences, he said softly, is the magic of cowards. She blinked in surprise. Something about the disdain in his voice made her straighten a little. He continued, "Whoever cursed you did not want your voice erased. They wanted your truth buried." Her hands froze mid-sign. The world seemed to tilt for a moment, memories flickering like distant embers she couldn't extinguish. The king noticed the shift and stepped closer, his tone changing. "You don't have to tell me," he said. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I will not allow anyone to harm you again." The promise hit her harder than she expected. She bit the inside of her cheek, fighting the warmth building behind her eyes. She had no words, literally, but if she did, they would have broken. He extended a hand toward her, not a command, an invitation. After a moment of hesitation, she placed her trembling fingers in his palm. He led her down the quiet street, each step slow, careful, as if he were walking beside someone fragile. Lena kept glancing at him, unsure whether she should fear him or trust him. Everything about him radiated danger. The long black coat brushing against his boots, the glow in his eyes, the way even the wind seemed to shift when he moved. And yet, next to him, she felt safer than she had in years. They stopped at a dark carriage waiting near the end of the road. 2 night horses, their coats shimmering like shadows, stood calmly despite the cold. The coachman bowed deeply, recognizing his king even without seeing his face fully. The king opened the carriage door and gestured for Lena to enter. She hesitated only a second before climbing in. Inside, the carriage smelled of cedar and faint traces of incense. Soft cushions lined the seats, and the lantern hanging above glowed with white light instead of the usual yellow, casting everything in a gentle clarity she wasn't used to. She rubbed her fingers over the fabric, trying to anchor herself. The king sat across from her, watching silently. Lena felt his gaze on her hands as she fidgeted with her apron. Finally, he spoke. "Your curse is not natural. It was crafted with intention." She signed quickly. "It happened years ago. It doesn't matter now." He tilted his head. "If you truly believed that, you wouldn't tremble when I mention it." Her fingers paused, and her breath shivered in her chest. She pulled her knees closer together, sitting more tightly in the corner of the seat. The king lowered his voice. "If I am intruding, tell me." She stared at him, lips parting. She couldn't tell him anything. She couldn't even whisper. Instead, she pressed her fingers lightly to her heart, then to the air, as if saying, "Please stop asking." He inhaled deeply, then nodded. "Very well. I won't ask again." Relief washed over her. But then he added something that made her heart jump. "Not until you are ready." She looked out the window to avoid his eyes. The night rushed by, crisp and dark, the moon hanging low like a pale lantern. Lena tried to calm her heartbeat, but the silence between them felt thick with something unspoken. After a long moment, the king said, "You should know why I was in that tavern tonight." She turned her head, confused. "I followed a trail," he said. "A trail of magic. Your curse magic." Her stomach tightened. Fear flickered in her eyes. She signed quickly. "Don't look for it. Don't follow it." He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees. "Magic leaves a signature. Yours is ancient. I have seen it only once before." Lena froze. He continued, voice steady and calm. "The last time I felt it, it belonged to someone who tried to overthrow my throne." She stared at him in shock, every muscle in her body tightening. He watched her reaction closely, his red eyes narrowing just a little. "That is why I cannot ignore this," he said, "not when it is tied to you." Her hands trembled. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but her silence trapped her. Her mind raced with a fear she hadn't felt in years. The king lifted a hand, slowly, gently, and placed it over his chest again. "A vow. You are not my enemy," he said softly. "You are someone who has been wounded by the same darkness that once threatened my realm." Something inside her cracked, not in pain, something closer to long-forgotten hope. The carriage slowed. Lena wiped quickly at her eyes, pretending she was simply fixing her hair. The king pretended not to notice. When the door opened, she expected a grand castle or a royal courtyard, but instead, she saw a quiet street lined with lanterns and trees. The king stepped out first and offered his hand again. "We're not at the palace," he said. "I'm taking you somewhere safe." She took his hand, stepping down carefully. The night air felt less sharp here, softer somehow. She looked around, confused. "Lena," he said gently, "I'm taking you to the one healer who might know how to break a curse like yours." She turned to him, eyes wide. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears, because there was only one healer in the kingdom who worked with forbidden magic, and that healer was supposed to be dead. Lena stared at the quiet street, her breath shallow, her pulse thudding in her ears. The lantern swayed gently with the night breeze, casting soft halos of white light on the cobblestones. Nothing about the place looked dangerous. Nothing hinted at forbidden magic or ancient secrets. And yet the vampire king had said the healer they were about to meet was supposed to be dead. Supposed to be. The words clung to her skin like frost, refusing to melt. He gestured for her to follow. His stride was calm, unhurried, the coat brushing against his boots as he led her toward a narrow alleyway between two stone houses. Lena hesitated, gripping her apron. She wanted to pull away, to run back into familiar fear rather than walk into unknown shadows. But when the king turned and extended his hand, she found herself stepping forward almost without thinking. There was a steadiness in his posture, a quiet confidence that somehow made the alley feel less like a trap and more like a passage. She slipped her hand into his. His fingers closed gently, not claiming, not dragging, simply guiding. Together they moved through the corridor of stone until they reached a small wooden door marked by nothing but a faded symbol carved near the frame. Lena tilted her head, studying it. A triangle wrapped in swirling lines. She recognized it instantly. Her lungs tightened. He saw the shock in her eyes. "You know this mark," he said quietly. She nodded, pressing her fingers to the symbol. The wood thrummed faintly beneath her skin, vibrating with old magic she thought she had left behind years ago. She swallowed hard. The king didn't rush her. He waited, letting her gather herself, letting her hands fall away when the memory became too sharp. Then he knocked. The sound echoed softly, swallowed by the night. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a light shifted behind the door, and soft footsteps approached. Lena's heartbeat climbed her throat. An old voice spoke through the wood, crackling like parchment. "I told you never to return, Elias." The vampire king exhaled slowly, as if he had expected exactly that tone. "And I told you," he answered, "that I would come back only if the matter was urgent." A pause. The door creaked. Then it opened just enough for a single amber eye to appear. The old woman stared at him for a long moment, then her gaze drifted to Lena. Her expression changed instantly. Shock, recognition, fear. "You brought her," the woman whispered. You brought one of them back." Lena flinched. One of them. The words cut deeper than the woman intended. She took a step backward, but the king caught her arm gently. "She is not one of them," he said firmly, "but she has been touched by their magic." The woman closed her eyes, breathing in through her nose. "You have no idea what you've done." "Actually," he said, "I believe I do." The door opened wider, revealing a narrow room filled with herbs, books, jars of shimmering dust, and small glowing stones arranged in careful patterns. The air smelled of mint and smoke, and something Lena recognized from her childhood. Incense used only by mage families, incense she had hoped never to breathe again. Her stomach twisted as she stepped inside. The healer shut the door behind them with a heavy sigh. She was small and thin, her gray hair braided down her back, her hands stained with ink and crushed leaves. She moved toward Lena with hesitant steps, studying her face as though comparing it to a memory. "You survived," the healer murmured. "I never thought any of you would." Lena stiffened. Her hands curled at her sides. She didn't want this. She didn't want any of this. The king stepped between them lightly, protective without being aggressive. "Tell her what you told me years ago." The healer shook her head. "No. She deserves to hear it from her own past, not from my assumptions." Lena signed quickly, sharply. I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to remember. I just want to leave." The healer read her gestures surprisingly well, her amber eyes softening. "Child," she whispered, "you carry a curse older than most kingdoms. If you do not face it, it will face you." Lena's chest tightened. The king saw the panic rising in her and spoke gently. "We can leave if you wish, but the curse won't disappear. Not without answers." She shook her head. Her fingers trembled as she signed, "I don't want answers. I want peace." The healer's gaze grew sad. "Then you should not have let the magic within you awaken." Lena froze. The king narrowed his eyes. "Explain." The healer turned to her shelves, pulling down a small bowl made of dark stone. She filled it with powder from a crystal jar and lit it. A thin white smoke curled upward, filling the room with a scent of cool earth. She motioned for Lena to come closer. "I can see the curse more clearly if you stand here." Lena hesitated, looking to the king. He nodded once, expression solemn. She approached the bowl. The smoke wrapped around her, brushing against her skin like fingers of wind. Her heartbeat quickened. Memories she had buried began to stir, faint shapes behind locked doors. The healer watched the smoke carefully. Her expression tightened. "Oh, child," she breathed. "Your curse isn't fading. It's waking up." Lena stumbled back, slamming into the king's chest. His hands steadied her immediately. "What does that mean?" he demanded. The healer looked between them with grave seriousness. Someone didn't silence her out of cruelty or fear. Someone silenced her because she was meant to deliver a message, a dangerous one. And now, whoever cast the curse has sensed her emotions resurfacing. They know she's afraid. They know she's remembering. Lena's skin turned cold. She shook her head violently, signing in a blur, "No, no, no. This isn't happening. I don't want magic. I don't want any of this." The healer reached out, but Lena pulled back instinctively. The king stood behind her like a pillar, steady and unmovable. "Tell us everything," he said. The healer swallowed hard. Her silence was meant to keep a secret locked inside her mind. But curses tied to secrets are fragile. The moment she feels enough trust, or enough fear, the curse begins to break. And when it breaks, the truth she carries surfaces. The king's jaw tightened. "What truth?" The healer shook her head. "I don't know. But whatever it is, someone powerful wanted it buried." Lena's knees nearly buckled. She pressed both hands to her mouth, panic pulsing like lightning beneath her skin. Her memories, shattered flashes she had always pushed away, pressed harder against the edges of her mind. The king steadied her, lowering his voice to a whisper meant only for her. "You are not alone. Whatever comes next, I will not let it consume you." His words hit her like warmth in a frozen night. But then the healer said something that made Lena's blood run cold. "The person who cursed her," the healer whispered, "isn't dead." The king stiffened. "And they will come for her soon." The healer's words hung in the air like a blade suspended by a single thread. Lena felt the room shrink around her, every breath harder than the last. The walls of herbs, jars, and ancient symbols seemed to tilt, as if the house itself reacted to the danger now spoken aloud. She pressed her back against the vampire king's chest, without meaning to, seeking the one thing in the room that felt steady. The king didn't move her away. If anything, his stance shifted, more protective, more grounded. His presence wrapped around her like a quiet shield. His voice, however, stayed controlled. "Who?" he asked. The healer's lips tightened. "I cannot speak their name. Magic ties my tongue when I try." Lena lifted her hands quickly, signing with shaking fingers. "Is it someone from my past?" The healer looked at her with sympathy that struck deeper than comfort. "Yes." Lena's throat constricted. The curse pulsed painfully at her neck, a cold ripple that slid beneath the skin like ice cracking. The king caught the movement. "Her silence reacted," he muttered. "It recognized the truth." Lena shrank back, heart banging against her ribs. She wanted to run. She wanted to tear the curse out with her bare hands. She wanted to forget the healer's voice entirely. But she couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The healer approached slowly, palms open. "Child, the curse is not just waking, it is tightening, trying to stop you from remembering." As if to prove it, a sudden burning pressure flared across Lena's throat. She gasped without sound, hands flying to her neck. The king immediately turned her toward him, his palm cradling the back of her head, his voice low and firm. "Look at me, Lena." Her eyes lifted, watery and wide. "You're safe," he said. "It cannot hurt you more than you already survived." But the pain was sharp, pulsing with every heartbeat, as if the curse didn't want her even hearing the truth spoken nearby. The healer hurried to a shelf and grabbed a thin strip of cloth covered in runes. She wrapped it around Lena's neck with practiced speed. The pressure eased. Lena sagged forward, trembling. The king caught her before she fell. The healer exhaled heavily. "This is worse than I expected. Whoever placed this curse tied it to a memory so dangerous that even whispering near it triggers resistance." Lena's fingers twitched with the urge to sign. The king steadied her hands gently so she could form the shapes. "Why me? Why would someone curse me?" The healer hesitated before answering. "Because you witnessed something, or learned something that could destroy the one who cast the curse." Lena froze. Her breath stilled. Deep in her mind, a flicker of a memory, a flash of burning light, a hand gripping her wrist, a voice whispering a threat, surfaced for a heartbeat before disappearing again. She staggered backward, hitting a table of herbs. The king reached for her, but she shook her head, needing space. The healer watched carefully. "She remembers pieces," the healer murmured, "but the curse blocks the rest." The king straightened. "How do we break it?" "Breaking it is dangerous," the healer said, "for her and for everyone involved." "We accept the risk," he answered. Lena looked up at him, startled. "We?" He met her gaze, eyes glowing faintly. "You are under my protection. I stand with you in this." Her chest tightened with something warm and devastating. The healer sighed deeply and motioned them toward a wooden table carved with intricate patterns. "Sit," she instructed. Lena hesitated, then obeyed. The king sat beside her. His hand hovered near hers, not touching, but close enough that she felt anchored. The healer lit another bowl of herbs, the smoke rising in thin spirals. It smelled sweeter this time, mixed with lavender and something metallic. Lena inhaled and felt her head lighten, her senses sharpening. She could hear the faint crackle of the lantern flame, the distant chirping of night insects, even the heartbeat of the king. Steady, unshaken. The healer placed both hands near Lena's temples without touching her. "Focus," she said softly. "Not on fear, on the feeling that sits beneath it." Lena closed her eyes. At first, there was only darkness. Then shapes began to move, shadows flickering like figures behind a curtain. She saw a long hallway lit with torches, a door opening, someone calling her name, a voice that once meant everything to her. Her breath hitched. The king noticed the way her fingers curled into fists and placed his hand gently over them. She didn't pull away. The healer continued. "What do you see?" Lena's lips parted, no sound emerging, but her mind filled with one image, a pair of eyes she once trusted, turning cold, a hand lifting, a flash of magic. Her voice ripping out of her throat like a stolen breath. Tears slipped down her cheeks. The healer's expression darkened. It was someone close to her, someone who feared she would expose them. The king's jaw clenched. Expose what? The healer opened her mouth, then stopped. Her shoulders trembled. "I told you," she whispered. "Magic stops me from saying their name." Lena opened her eyes. They were full of terror, but also something else, recognition. She signed slowly, reluctantly. "I know who it was." The king frowned. "Then tell us." She shook her head fiercely, tears spilling. Her stomach twisted, her chest tightened. The curse pulsed violently at the base of her throat as though warning her. The healer grabbed her hand. "Lena, listen to me. You don't have to say it. Just point me toward the memory." Lena swallowed hard. Her fingers trembled as she formed a single sign. Family. The healer inhaled sharply, but before she could speak, the lantern on the wall flickered violently. The air in the room thickened. A crack of muffled thunder rolled outside, though the sky had been clear just minutes ago. The king's eyes flashed bright red. He stood instantly, positioning himself between Lena and the door. "Someone is coming," he said. The healer's face drained of color. "They shouldn't be able to find this place." Lena gripped the table, heart pounding hard enough to shake her whole body. Her breath came in quick, silent gasps. A cold chill prickled along her spine. She knew that presence in the air. She felt it in her bones. It was the same presence she felt the night she lost her voice. The king stepped closer to her, voice steady despite the danger pressing in. "Stay behind me," he said. "No matter what." Before she could react, the door handle turned, slowly, deliberately. Then a familiar voice echoed from the other side of the wood. "Lena, open the door." Her blood turned to ice. The voice on the other side of the door wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Its softness alone made Lena's skin crawl, made her heart slam against her ribs so hard she thought it might break. The healer backed away from the entrance, her breath catching. The vampire king stepped forward, his entire posture shifting into something sharp, cold, and lethal. The lantern light flickered again, bending toward the door as if pulled by invisible hands. "Lena," the voice repeated, smooth as honey over steel. "I know you're in there. Open the door." Her knees almost buckled. She stumbled back, grabbing the edge of the table. Her fingers trembled violently. The healer moved to steady her, but Lena shook her head. Her gaze stayed locked on the door, terror shining in her eyes like cracked glass. The king glanced at her from over his shoulder. "Who is it?" he whispered. She couldn't answer, couldn't sign, couldn't breathe. The curse pulsed violently across her throat, a painful throb that nearly brought her to her knees. The healer saw it and gasped. "It's reacting to fear," she whispered. "If she panics, it will tighten." The king turned to her fully, stepping close enough to block the door from her view. "Lena, look at me, not the door." She lifted her eyes, tears tumbling down her cheeks. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, grounding her. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Whoever they are, they will not touch you." But the voice behind the door laughed softly, as if it had heard him, as if it enjoyed the promise of defiance. The handle rattled again. "Why are you hiding from me, Lena? You know better than that." The healer swallowed hard, her voice shaky. "We need to mask the room. If they see her, if they feel her curse reacting, they'll know." The king nodded. "Do it." The healer rushed to the shelves, grabbing 3 small vials and a handful of dried petals. She scattered them in a circle on the floor and muttered an incantation under her breath. A faint shimmer rose around the room, like heat above stone. But before the spell could settle completely, the door shook violently, once, then again. The king lifted a hand, and the room froze. "Before we continue," he murmured. Lena blinked. "What?" He turned his head slightly toward the imaginary audience beyond the walls, his voice never losing its calm. "Tell me in the comments what you think of this story so far, and what you would do in her place. Don't leave the video, because what comes next will give you chills." The moment passed in a heartbeat. Then the king's eyes glowed a deeper red. The air thickened as he summoned power ancient enough to silence the world. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Stay behind me, Lena." She obeyed, stumbling back until her shoulders hit the wall. The healer pulled her into the protective circle of shimmering light just as the door cracked open. Not all the way, but enough for a sliver of shadow to bleed into the room. A hand, pale, elegant, adorned with a single silver ring, slipped through the gap. "Lena," the voice murmured. "Come here." She covered her ears, shaking her head violently. But the voice wasn't just sound. It slithered across her skin, whispering memories she had buried in the darkest corners of her mind. A childhood room with blue curtains, warm hands braiding her hair, a soft voice telling her stories, a smile that once felt like home. Then the moment it all broke, a flash of white magic. Her voice ripped away, silence forced into her throat. The betrayal she never understood. Her vision blurred. The room spun. The king noticed instantly. The voice is triggering the curse. Block it out. But she couldn't, not when the memories burst through like a flood. She pressed her forehead against the wall, trying to breathe. The healer grasped her hands and forced her to look into her eyes. "Stay with me, child. Breathe. You are not there anymore." The door opened another inch. A figure stood outside, cloaked in shadows, face obscured. But Lena didn't need to see it. The very shape of the silhouette, shattered her. The king stepped forward, placing himself between the intruder and everyone inside. "You will not come any closer," he said, voice like frost cracking stone. "Move," the figure answered simply. "No." Silence. Then a slow chuckle, soft and poisonous. "You think you can protect her from me?" The king's eyes burned. "I do not think it. I promise it." The shadows stirred, swirling like smoke around the figure. Lena clutched the healer's arm, shaking her head over and over. She didn't want them to fight. She didn't want bloodshed. She didn't want the past resurrecting itself in front of her eyes. The healer whispered urgently, "Lena, listen to me. If you want us to stop them, you need to show me the memory, even a piece of it." Lena shook her head so violently it hurt. No, she couldn't. She wasn't ready. The healer grabbed her face gently. "Child, you already know who it is, but he," she nodded at the king, "needs to know too. If he doesn't, he cannot protect you." Lena's pulse roared like thunder in her ears. Another memory burst forward, one she had tried to bury deeper than all the others, a family gathering, a man's voice rising in anger, her hands trembling as she held something, a letter, a secret she wasn't supposed to find, his expression shifting from fear to fury, magic gathering around his palm, her throat burning, silence swallowing her scream. The healer saw it in her eyes. Her memories are coming back. Lena fell to her knees, shaking. The king rushed to her, placing a hand on her back. "Lena, stay with me. Who cursed you?" Her lips parted. She tried so desperately to speak. A sound rose in her chest, trembling like a trapped bird. But the curse crushed it. Instead, she lifted a trembling hand and pointed toward the door. The king turned slowly. The figure outside pushed the door wide open at last. Lantern light spilled onto the intruder's face. Lena's breath left her in a silent scream. The vampire king's entire body went rigid, and the healer whispered the truth Lena had been too afraid to face. "It's your father." Lena's father stood in the doorway, as if he had stepped out of one of her nightmares and into the healer's small room. The years had etched lines on his face, but his eyes were exactly the same as the last time she had seen them. Sharp, steady, full of an authority that once made her feel safe and later made her feel very small. He wore a simple dark coat, hands relaxed at his sides, but magic pressed around him like invisible armor, bending the lantern light as if it didn't dare touch him directly. He let his gaze pass over the healer, over the shelves of herbs and old books, and finally settle on the vampire king. Only then did he look at Lena. For a moment, the room fell completely silent. No one moved. Lena could hear her own heartbeat, loud and frantic. Her father's eyes softened for just a second when he saw the fear in hers. Then his jaw tightened, and the softness vanished. "So," he said quietly, "the king found you before I could." The vampire king stepped forward, placing himself fully between Lena and her father. "You will not take one more step toward her," he said. His voice didn't rise, but the air around him darkened, as if the night outside had entered the room with him. Her father tilted his head slightly. "Your Majesty," he said with a mocking hint of respect, "I thought you were too busy ruling a kingdom to interfere in family matters." The king's eyes glowed a deeper red. "You cursed your own daughter and call it a family matter." Lena flinched at the word cursed. Her father's gaze flicked to her for a moment, and something like regret flashed across his face before he buried it. "I did what I had to do," he said, "to protect her, to protect everyone." Lena's hands trembled as she lifted them to sign. "Protect me from what?" Her fingers moved quickly, desperate, the motions pulling at the cloth wrapped around her throat. The healer watched, then spoke for her. "She wants to know what you were protecting her from," the healer said quietly. Her father's eyes lingered on Lena's hands. His shoulders lowered just a fraction, as if the question weighed more than all the magic in the room. "From herself," he answered. "From what she knew. From the people who would have killed her for speaking." The king stepped closer, his coat brushing the edge of the healer's circle on the floor. "You silenced her instead of protecting her. That is not love, that is control." Her father's gaze hardened. "It is easy to judge when you rule from a palace, far from the kind of choices we had to make." His eyes returned to Lena. You think I didn't try to protect you? You think I wanted to rip your voice away?" His voice cracked on the last word, raw for a second before he swallowed it down. Lena's chest ached. She remembered being a child, his hand warm around hers as they crossed busy streets, his laugh when she stumbled over words, the way he used to sit on the floor with her and draw lines of chalk, pretending they were maps of other worlds. That man and the one standing here now felt like two different people, and yet they were the same. That was what hurt most. The healer cleared her throat, voice low but firm. "The curse is waking, whether you like it or not," she said to him. "She's remembering." His eyes snapped to her. "And that is why I came," he said. "Because once she remembers, the people who wanted her silenced will know. They will feel it, and they will come for her." The king's expression sharpened. "Who are they?" Her father's jaw clenched. "You already know, Elias. You felt their magic in her curse, didn't you?" He took a slow, measured breath. "The same people who once tried to end your reign." The king's eyes cooled, turning almost glassy. "The old council," he said. It wasn't a question. Lena frowned, confused. Her fingers moved hesitantly. "Council?" The healer nodded in her direction. "Years ago, a secret council of nobles and mages tried to overthrow the vampire king," she explained. "They were humans and vampires both, afraid of change, afraid of the balance the king was trying to build. They planned to destroy him and blame each other's kind for it. The war would have been endless." Her father's voice grew tight. "We weren't all monsters," he said. "Some of us were trying to stop them from going too far. Some of us joined to watch, to warn, to delay. But things moved faster than we thought." Lena stared at him, her mind scrambling. "Why didn't you tell me?" She signed. "Why did you let me think you hated me?" Her hands shook so much that the signs almost blurred together. He looked at her as if the words struck him physically. "Because if you had known," he said softly, "you would have looked at me the way you're looking at me now." The king folded his arms, cloak rustling softly. "Stop circling the truth," he said. "Tell her what she saw. Tell her why you cursed your own child." Her father's shoulders sagged. For the first time since he entered, he seemed smaller, as if the weight of the years had finally settled on him. He turned fully to Lena. "You remember that night," he said gently. "At least pieces of it. The long hall, the door, the shouting." Images flickered in her mind again. Torches on the wall, the taste of fear like iron in her mouth, her bare feet on cold stone. She nodded, tears already gathering. "You weren't supposed to be there," he continued. "I told you to stay in your room. I thought you were asleep, but you followed me." His eyes closed briefly. "You always followed me." Lena's lips trembled. She clutched the edge of the table to steady herself. "You saw the council meeting," he said. "You saw them reveal their plan. They wanted to poison the king's bloodline at the next treaty gathering, to frame the human villages and force a war. You saw who poured the poison. You saw which vampire lord agreed to take the first sip and pretend to suffer. You saw the names they spoke, every one of them, and you understood." Lena's breath caught. A wave of nausea rolled through her as fragments of memory locked into place. Voices, names, faces leaning over a map. Someone saying, "If the king dies surrounded by humans, they will be blamed." Her small hands gripping the doorframe. A floorboard creaking. "You stepped inside before I could stop you," her father said, his voice rough. "You shouted that it was wrong, that you would tell, that you would go to the guards, to the palace, to anyone who would listen." The healer watched Lena closely. "That was when they saw your value," she murmured. "Not as a child, as a threat." Her father nodded, eyes dark. "One of them raised their hand to silence you forever, to end it quickly." His fingers twitched as if remembering the moment. "I stepped between you and the spell. I took half of it myself. The other half hit you." Lena's eyes widened. She looked at his throat for the first time, really looked, and saw faint, jagged scars hidden in the shadow of his collar. She hadn't noticed them before, or maybe she had never looked closely enough. A deep ache opened in her chest. "The spell was meant to kill," he said quietly. "I twisted it as it hit. I changed it, just enough. Enough to keep you alive, but not enough to keep your voice." The king studied him. expression unreadable. "You could have brought her to me," he pointed out. "I would have protected her." Her father laughed once, bitter and tired. "Would you? She carried the names of half the nobles around you in her memory. If you had failed to keep her safe, they would have killed her and used it as an excuse to claim you couldn't even guard a single human child. If you succeeded, you would have been ruling a kingdom that knew you were surrounded by traitors. Your reign would have turned into a hunt, and humans would have paid the highest price." The healer's hands tightened around her bowl. "So you chose silence," she whispered. "I chose her life," he answered. "I took her voice so they wouldn't see her as a danger. I sent her away. I made sure no one knew she remembered." His eyes flicked to Lena, full of something raw and broken. "I let you hate me because it kept you safe." Lena's knees shook. Her world felt like it had tilted on its axis. Part of her wanted to run to him and cling to the father who had stepped in front of a killing spell. Another part wanted to push him away for deciding her fate without asking, for choosing a life of silence for her without ever explaining why. The king's voice cut through the thick air. "And now?" he asked. "Why appear now if your plan was to keep her hidden?" Her father's shoulders straightened. "Because the balance is breaking," he said. "The old council is moving again. Some of them died. Some lost power, but not all. They have felt her curse stirring. They know someone is tampering with it." His gaze hardened. "They know she is starting to remember." Lena's stomach dropped. Her fingers lifted weakly to sign. "Are they coming for me?" He didn't answer with words. He didn't need to. The silence was enough. The king stepped closer to Lena, his presence like a barrier of stone and night. "Let them come," he said. "I am not the same king they tried to poison years ago." Her father met his gaze, unflinching. "Then be ready," he said, "because when they come, they will not only try to kill you." He glanced at Lena, and his voice lowered, trembling for the first time. "They will try to finish what they started with her." Lena looked from the king to her father, her heart splitting between the man who had cursed her and the man who had defended her. The curse around her throat pulsed again, but this time it felt different. Not just like a chain tightening, but like something cracking, a shell beginning to split. For the first time since losing her voice, she felt a sound rise from deep inside. A faint, broken note trapped behind layers of magic. It didn't reach the air, but it shook her entire body. Both men heard it in their own way. The king's eyes softened. Her father's filled with a flash of stunned hope. Whatever happened next, Lena realized, would not just decide the fate of a kingdom. It would decide what her silence had been for all these years, punishment, protection, or the beginning of something neither of them could yet see. Night pressed against the healer's house, as if trying to seep through the walls. Lena felt it in her bones, the weight of everything she had remembered, everything she had feared, everything she had tried for years to forget. The vampire king stood at the door, tense and unmoving, while her father hovered nearby, torn between guilt and determination. The healer crouched near the floor, her hand trembling as it traced a glowing circle of protection. "They're close," she whispered. "If they reach her, everything begins again." A heavy blow struck the door, sending dust drifting from the frame. Lena jumped. The king didn't turn. His voice was steady and cold. "Stay behind me." Her father stepped closer, blue light rising over his hands. "Lena, I know I failed you, but I won't fail you tonight." Another strike hit the door, louder, sharper. Then a voice seeped through the cracks, calm and cruel. "Give us the girl, and this ends quickly." Lena's stomach twisted. She clutched the small vial the healer had given her earlier, feeling its fragile glass against her palm. The healer's voice trembled. "Child, if you want to break the curse for good, you must choose the memory. You must face it." Lena closed her eyes, breath shaking. She had spent years hiding from that night, burying flashes of faces, voices, fear. But she wasn't hiding in a tavern anymore. The king was here. Her father was here. And this time, she wasn't alone. The door began to split. Magic crackled in the air like tiny lightning bolts. Lena crushed the vial. Cold silver smoke rushed into her lungs. The room blurred, then shifted. She was small again, bare feet on stone, a long hallway. voices whispering plans to poison the king and ignite a war. She saw the traitors, heard every word. Then she saw herself scream, only to have the spell hit her, ripping her voice away. The memory vanished as the present snapped back. The door blasted open. 3 cloaked figures stepped inside, power swirling around their hands. The king moved first, red energy erupting like a shield. Her father stepped beside him, blue light twisting in his palms. The collision of forces shook the entire room. Lena didn't think. She stepped forward. The healer gasped. Her father shouted her name. But the curse, tightening, cracking, finally gave way when Lena drew in a breath and forced the word out. No. It came out rough, painful, barely a whisper, yet it echoed like thunder. The runes around her neck shattered. The entire room froze. The traitors stared at her, horrified. Lena lifted her chin, voice trembling but alive. I remember everything you did. She named them, one by one. Every detail they had tried to bury, every lie, every plan. The king turned toward the traitors, power rising in a wave behind him. Your silence is over, he said, and so is your counsel. The battle ended quickly after that. The traitors were bound and taken away for trial, by humans and vampires together. Later, wrapped in a blanket, Lena sat as her father knelt beside her. Tears ran down his face. Lena, your voice. She swallowed, throat raw. You should have trusted me. I know, he whispered, but I'm here now, if you'll let me be. The king approached, softer now. You saved more lives tonight than you will ever realize. He extended a hand. If you choose it, you can come to the palace, not as a servant, but as a voice that was nearly stolen. For the first time, Lena smiled. Small, shaky, but real. Her life, finally, belonged to her. What did you think of the story? Subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who will also be moved today.